Welcome, everybody. It's again once more an honor to be here representing COEUR and our new edition 2.0 of the characteristics of undergraduate research, of excellence in undergraduate research. And people keep asking me why did we go for version 2.0 and why and how I got involved. And the truth is that it was Jeanne Mekolichick that contacted me about 3 years ago and said, do you want to lead this team? I didn't know what I was getting into, but I was very passionate about the original version because it had helped me quite a bit set up the office that we have at the University of Texas at El Paso. So I said, sure, I'll do this. And I was very lucky with the team that was put together to help out with this. And all of them are here today. So it's great to see them again. And the part of the reason we decided to go ahead and create this new version of the characteristics was that there had been changes in the higher education landscape. The demographic of students has been changed with respect to 12, 13 years ago when the original came out. Enrollment in community colleges has increased tremendously, and that also led to changes in how we approach getting students to participate in undergraduate research. There have been tons of questions, particularly by parents, about the value of a college education and how is it that we can prepare students for the workforce better. And in consideration of what we do in getting students to participate in undergraduate research, we realize that doing research is what prepares students for the real world and the workforce. There has been tremendous emphasis on different kinds of high impact practices, undergraduate research being one of them, and to me being the best, but it encompasses many of them. And in the new characteristics, we have made an effort to put together the connection between the different high impact practices. There have been a lot of emphasis in the last 13 years or so on undergraduate research mentoring and the mentor training part of things. In the past, a mentor would say, yeah, I want a student, but they didn't know how to train the student. They were not prepared for the different nuances that it takes to get students to participate in research, and particularly given the changes in demographics and et cetera. And also there has been an increase in the number of course-based undergraduate research experiences offered. So we wanted to make sure that the new version has more specifics on how to develop COEURs, et cetera. So that's in a nutshell the reason, what prompted the idea of a new version. In the next couple of minutes, we want to get the perspective of the different individuals that contributed to this. So I like to have my co-authors take the microphone and introduce themselves. Let's start with Jeanne.
Thank you, Lourdes. Good afternoon, or maybe still morning for some folks. I am Jeanne Mekolichick. I serve as the Associate Provost of Research, Faculty Success, and Strategic Initiatives at Radford University. I'm also a sociologist and former president of COEUR. I've been involved in COEUR for many, many years. And, as Lourdes said, during my presidency, and when I served on the board prior to that, we've been talking about the need for an update to the characteristics of excellence. And as my presidency was coming to a close, I was like, oh, we really need to, kind of get a key group of folks together to extend this and all the ways that Lourdes shared. And so what I brought to the table was that piece about the career readiness, right? So among all the different things that had changed over the past 10 years, that national narrative, as Lourdes was saying, about the importance of career readiness, the erosion of the value of higher education. I really continue to believe that undergraduate research and the work that we do at COEUR and the work that faculty and students do together in those mentoring relationships, both within and beyond the classroom, are really key to the answer to that for why higher education and what undergraduate research can do for students, for faculty, for our communities, for our universities. And so I thought we really needed to bring that into the characteristics of excellence as we're thinking about, as Lourdes said, you know, she used the first version to build her center for undergraduate research. And as we're thinking about practitioners in this space, all of you, what all do we need to be thinking about as we're building our programs or our classes, and the mentorship that we need to do for our students? So to me, and what I was bringing in was that career readiness piece, connecting the value and impact of the undergraduate research experience, overlapping that to the career readiness, helping us situate ourselves in that so what space in the national narrative around the value of higher education and the value of undergraduate research, as many of us are at institutions where our revenues are shrinking, right? Our student populations are changing in a variety of ways. We are increasingly called upon to demonstrate the value of the work that we're doing, right? And why it's important and transformative. And I think a part of that answer, particularly obviously for those of us on the call that you joined, right, that undergraduate research can really be that answer in responding to that. So with that, I will throw it over to Buffie.
Hello, everyone. I continue to be just incredibly honored to be a part of this work. I am a professor of psychology at Elon University, which is a previous Aura winner. So I credit a lot of my professional development within the form of undergraduate research, but just also myself as a scholar, with the fact that I was at an institution that was very much dedicated to undergraduate research, and undergraduates were working with me on every step of my research work and development. I'm also a student, a former student of undergraduate, who benefited from undergraduate research. And I don't think I would have sat here, I would be sitting here today had I not had that experience. So I've always valued that. In addition to just being engaged in undergraduate research at Elon, I've also been a Center for Engaged Learning scholar, and I've worked a lot and written a lot and thought a lot about the ways in which we engage students from historically underrepresented, if not excluded, minoritized backgrounds in high impact practices. Much of that work has focused on undergraduate research and the ways in which I think undergraduate research and other high impact practices can be an equity driving vehicle, especially if there's high quality mentorship involved. And I was doing this work, engaged with this work at the same time that I was spearheading an initiative at Elon that was focused on looking at the ways in which we engage mentoring across the campus and the fact that we need to consider this from an ecosystem perspective. So it was really interesting to be writing and working with this team while also leading and working and writing and thinking about these topics and how they intersect with my own institution. And then I think the third thread that I really want to highlight is the fact that we're also doing this work at an incredibly dynamic moment in time. This work was done when SCOTUS came down with a decision to alter the ways in which we can engage in recruitment and discuss access with populations that, again, have historically not been allowed a seat at the table. And we were doing this knowing that we had institutions who were incredibly excited and encouraged and dedicated to wanting to continue diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, but we're facing barriers at the state levels. We're no longer able to say certain words. And so these were kind of the elements that were kind of floating around me and certainly influencing me in this work. I would say the area that I was most passionate about, and I took some of the lead in, was the discussions around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think what's really powerful is that we made a decision collectively early on that this was not going to be just an added section, but that this was something that needed to be threaded throughout. And so it's hard to kind of think of one section when in actuality you're seeing elements of our commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion threaded throughout. And so I think what I would uplift the most is the fact that it was very clear that you cannot do this work, you cannot do it well, if there is not a way of looking at and intentionally designing at the infrastructural level, that these are not things that are just left to one or two individuals who are extremely passionate about it, that this COEUR is really saying that if you want to lead, if you want to be ready for what is to come next, you need to be thinking about that intentionally in the design, all the design elements, and thinking from an ecosystem perspective of how they link together, and thinking about who has historically not been included in that table and why, and whose responsibility it is to include them, which, spoiler alert, it's a shared responsibility. So these are the things that I'm taking away, the hope that I'm taking away, because again, as we face more mounting pressure, and I cannot imagine what is to come, we have a document that's saying to really get us where we need to go, we can't forget that. We can't abandon these efforts. We need to dig further into them, and certainly in an intentional way. So with that, I will pass this on over to Winny.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jeanne, Buffie, and Lourdes. I'm Winnie Dong. I'm a professor in materials engineering at Cal Poly Pomona, one of the California State University system institutions. And I was involved in this project because COEUR leadership asked me to. And I think that's always a wise choice, is to say yes if COEUR leadership reaches out to you, because you always get involved in really interesting projects along with really thoughtful individuals. And I really want to echo what Buffie was just mentioning, that the idea of inclusion, access, equity really is threaded throughout the entire characteristics document. And I think that's one of the most powerful things about the this 2.0 version of characteristics of excellence, is that it is very intentional about the ways that undergraduate research needs to be structured in order for it to be maximally effective and impactful, right? And my particular contribution was in two ways. I contributed to the mentorship aspect of the document, and that's it's something very dear to my heart, because I benefited so much from mentorship, both in terms of being an undergraduate student researcher and then just later on. And I know that traditionally, especially when the first version of this document was being written, mentorship in undergraduate research was different, right? It was a lot of one-on-one mentoring. You worked with one student. That student probably has similar background to you, because that's the kind of student that ends up, approaching you, or you picking out of a classroom to work with. But now we are in institutions where we have lots of students who are different from us in many different ways. And also the idea of a team, working with a team of students, is much more common now than compared to, 12, 15 years ago. So mentors also had to adjust. And so bring some of that to light, some of the best practices in mentoring undergraduate students in research. Another aspect that I was involved in, I hope that you all have a chance to read them, is to collect case studies. I don't know if we call them case studies, but reaching out to previous Aura Award winners and asking them to talk a little bit about how they use the first version of characteristics of excellence and creating their programs, and how they might use the new version in enhancing, improving, or continuing their programs. So just having the ability to talk to some of those folks who have really put a lot of thought into how they've structured the undergraduate research programs. That was a real treat for me to interact with them in that way, and then to see what they've written. So even though that's not in like the main part of the characteristics document, I hope you all get a chance to read about some of that. And then they also included student reflections, how the students interacted, how they got involved in undergraduate research, and what the takeaways that the students had. So I thought those were super powerful, and really happy that we were able to include those. And then one last thing, which I had nothing to do with, that I found really, really useful for the characteristics document, and that's the assessment piece. Todd, I don't know who, or Lourdes, if one of you put that together, but that was so cool. When I got to interact with the assessment piece to look at, for each of the characteristics, how your own institution is doing. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that, I found it super useful for my institution to have all of us, like we have a group of faculty members and staff members who work on undergraduate research as a committee. And so we sat down with that document and kind of talked about where we're lacking, where we're doing well, and what we could do to improve. So I thought that was a really cool document.
Thank you, Winnie. I'm going to use that as a perfect segue. In March, we will be having a presentation as well on the assessment pieces and how to implement the characteristics of March 12th, I want to say off the top of my head. So be on the lookout for that. We'll be advertising that shortly. Once again, questions, or if you have any experiences or successes that you want to share about your relationship with the characteristics of excellence, we have intentionally prioritized this time to hear from you. So feel free to put your questions into the chat, or you can use the raise hand emotion, and then we will bring you up to the front and you'll be able to unmute yourself. While they are doing that, I'll put the links to the characteristics into the chat as well. I know one of the questions we get most in the national office, at least, is there used to be 12 characteristics, Lourdes, and now there are only 11. What happened? What got moved? The short answer is that strategic planning, which was its own characteristic, has been moved into the campus mission and culture section. So all the original content is still there. I know it feels like we've lost a characteristic, but we actually haven't. We are now still have all the former characteristics, and we have just added all that stuff that they were mentioning, the DEI, the career skills, tangible career skills that are learned out of that, mentorship training, working with other high impact practices like study abroad and internships, community engagement. All of that has just been added into it. So it really is a beautiful refresh to deal with this new era. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can use the raise hand under React down at the bottom of your screen, and we'll unmute you to ask your question. Laura asks, I would very much love to hear about challenges and successes when creating remote research experiences that meet the criteria for excellence. So out of the four of you, or if anyone else here on this phone call has experience with that, we'd love to hear your experience as well. Challenges and successes with creating remote research experiences.
Take a stab at that first. So I was serving as the PI for a grant that funded students who do undergraduate research with faculty mentors during the pandemic. And Some people just went completely off online to just have students do lit review during that time. And that still, provided a really rich learning experience for students for sure. And there was one faculty member in particular who would ask her students to write down the experiment the student thinks they should be doing. Then she put on a GoPro on her head, went to the lab, and followed the instructions exactly. Even when she knew that it wasn't going to work, she would follow the instructions as the students have written for the experiments. She was a biologist, exactly. And then share with them the results of the data from the experiments. And then the students will have to figure out how to interpret the data and what went wrong, what went right. And they would debrief, and then they would write down another set of experiments, and then she would go back in the lab and do them. I think that's going way above and beyond. I'm not saying everyone should do that, but that was one way a faculty member had decided that that was how she was going to deal with the remote situation. And I thought it was a fantastic example of thinking outside the box and still really teaching the students, giving them that experience of failure and successes in the research experience. I think when you talk about successes and barriers, it really depends on what you want, what the goal of the research experience is for the students. Is it to get the hands-on experience to learn how to measure things? Is it to understand a certain concept? And that determines what you do in that remote environment. I have another student who is working with a faculty member in Poland, and he's a great mentor, but a lot of what they do is simulations, but they're able to make it work. And the students that he mentors often win research award, presentation awards on the CSU, that are multi-campus university level. So I think it really boils down to knowing well what it is that you want the students to get out of that experience, and then curating that experience to make sure the students are getting that.
I would add to what Winnie said, that it depends on the field of the research experience. We had several students doing research in psychology, sociology, developing surveys, and so on. And that worked out really well, because there would be the meetings with the mentor, and the students would propose what questions should be included in the survey, and then they would organize the list of individuals that they wanted to survey, or the individuals that they wanted to interview, and it allowed for a excellent connection with other individuals, as long as they had Zoom or Teams to communicate with. So it depends on the field. For lab work, definitely that go-to the camera to simulate the experiments as the students dictated what the individual should do worked out really well. So it depends on the field. Did we answer your question?
So I'm curious to hear from the audience. I'm sure that you are all either involved in undergraduate research or thinking about creating undergraduate research programs on your own, at your own institutions. What is it that you would like to get from us in terms of helping you establish an undergraduate research program or improve it? Or are there things that you need, even if it's not something that we could provide, like funding, but maybe, as collectively, we could think about how different folks have done that to get money to support offices like this.
Trino says assessment guidelines, since that's not what we were trained to do, is helpful.
There are a ton of assessment tools out there that individuals can use it depends on what you want to assess. Do you want to assess a program? Do you want to assess the office? Do you want to assess the mentors? But there are a ton of, there are a bunch of publications out there. If you reach out to me independently, I can provide a few because it depends on what you're looking for. One of the things that people are very focused on these days are, you know, the science identity and the science self-efficacy is one of them, but those are for the ones in the sciences. So there are a number of different examples there. I'm not an evaluator, but I have an excellent team of evaluators that helped us out with that. And, you know, there are publications coming out right now that use those evaluation tools.
Carol says she would love to hear more about how the characteristics has been used in the establishment for new centers of undergraduate research. So my panel, or once again, this is also a question for the whole community. So if you have expertise or experience in this, we would love to hear that as well from you.
So I was lucky enough to have served as a moderator, a facilitator for Institute of Higher Ed in the state of Nevada, and they were looking at establishing undergraduate research centers and programs and helping faculty mentors serve as undergraduate research mentors throughout all the different institutions across the state. And I brought in the assessment tool that we were just talking about. And that is one really great way. So I can't tell you, this just happened in October, and they were using it as a way to get them to start thinking about how to use the characteristics to be able to start undergraduate research office on their individual campuses. I don't have any data on like whether any new ones has been started, but definitely they found it really useful to look at the different characteristics. And like, for example, you know, when it talked about the strategic planning and the administrative support, like how well the campus supports undergraduate research, they could say, you know, we are low, but there are places for you to mark down, like where are areas of opportunity? Who has been championing this on your campus? And they were able to write that down, like think about, oh, so-and-so already does some of these things. There's this other program. We have a MARC program on campus that does this and brings in this much money. So they were able to kind of put down on a piece of paper all the different things that they needed and also things that exist already on campus. And so that they could start to towards forming a new program like that. So I would say if you're thinking about starting a new office, like that assessment tool sounds like you are assessing something that already exists, but it could also be used to create a new program.
So I'll go ahead and
yeah, go Jeanne.
Dovetail on that. So Margaret just popped in, and I know there were other questions that have come up, but since this one I think kind of really relates to what Winnie was just saying, Margaret is asking what characteristics of Excellence 2.0 implementation suggestions do you have for URP offices with shoestring budgets? And so I really think the piece that Winnie was talking about, right? Like looking across your institution and identifying maybe who is doing what resources you already have. Oftentimes there's interest in elements that exist that all you need to do is align with, right? Or offer the suggestion that, hey, we're building this new office. Here's what we're aiming to do. Would you like to partner on that? And in my experience, and I think many others, and I'd welcome folks to join in, that people are really interested in partnering. The goal here is student success, which resonates well across many campuses, you know, so really looking for partners, looking for alignment with strategic plans that your institution already has. What are the initiatives that leadership is advancing forward? How do you fit the work that you're doing into those, right? So that oftentimes helps you advance, as well as helps you get some pockets of funding. There's always little bits of money around, right? And being able to strategically identify the work that you're doing as aligned with the work that the institution is trying to advance can often open up those opportunities.
I'll just echo something I know I heard at the Characteristics of Excellence panel at Connect UR last June. But it's also okay to like snowball these. So locate 1, 2, maybe 3 of these you want to work on. You don't have to work on all 11 characteristics at the same time with full energy. Like just start with one and just work on that. And next year you add another to it, and just so it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. You can definitely piecemeal some of these together, and some of them go together really smoothly. Jeanne, I think you'll be able to address this with talking about career readiness skills very easily, but Elizabeth wants to know more about, she sees very few community colleges that offer undergraduate research. Do you see having undergraduate research at community colleges, how this would be beneficial for students?
Yeah, thank you, Todd, and thank you, Elizabeth, for the question. So 100% agree that I think it would be really valuable, and certainly understand from community college colleagues that I've talked with about this, those that have undergraduate research programs or have done undergraduate research in classes at a community colleges, and those that aren't, right? And understanding the challenges, which are challenges and opportunities, which are different across our different institution types, right? So I'd absolutely argue the career readiness piece, which often resonates really well in the community college space, that the benefits that we often see from participating in undergraduate research align very well with the NACE career readiness competencies. And I'm sure some folks are really familiar to maybe not familiar at all with that. So NACE is the National Association of Colleges and Employers. It is the professional organization of your career services colleagues. And they have been collecting over time the top core competencies that employers are looking for in new talent. And those oftentimes, or maybe previously, were called soft skills, right? So these are things are like teamwork and career or critical thinking, right? Or professional development. So there's a series of 8 that really are durable, right? That we've seen over time. And those overlap quite a bit with the benefits that we see in undergraduate research. And I was fortunate enough to author the position paper at COEUR on mapping those undergraduate research benefits with the NACE competencies, which could be a vehicle. I think it's often always in framing, right? It could be a vehicle for advancing in the community college space the value of undergraduate research in preparing students for that world of work.
I will say, as someone that works with Heather on creating content from the national office to meet needs, we are definitely hearing an increase in conversation about the role of undergraduate research at community colleges. And so we definitely are trying to work on an online gathering, a COEUR conversation on the topic of UR at community colleges that will happen in 2025. So be on the lookout for that as well.
Just to add into the community college conversation, because of my work in collecting some of the case studies, I had a chance to talk with some community college folks who do undergraduate research, and what they have told me is that it really benefited the students in two ways. One is that community college students are very much a commuter kind of environment. Lots of them go take a class, then go work and go home, or, and they don't have a network or a community on campus. And doing undergraduate research really gets them to be involved with others and meet others who are interested in the same things as they are. And that really has helped in terms of retention and getting them to actually transfer. We know that very few community, like the percentage of community college students who end up actually transferring is quite low compared to the number of community college students who are there. So that definitely helps in terms of the percentage that transfer. And another thing is that it increases their confidence and helps them identify what is it that they're interested in, right? So some community college students are going there, are going to a community college because they haven't quite figured out what it is that they want to do. They're still exploring. And so that undergraduate research experience helps them explore in ways that are different than just taking a class. Because when you're taking a class, you get the knowledge, but you don't actually know the application. And doing the research is what gets them to understand, oh, I can apply it to this. And that also helps in terms of retention and the percentage that end up transferring.
And I would like to add to what both Jeanne and Winnie have mentioned related to community colleges. There is a center funded by NSF called All Rise Alliance in Arizona that has brought together a large number of community colleges in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas to help the faculty members in those community colleges develop COEURs, course based on their graduate research experiences, so that they can implement undergraduate research in their courses. They've been at it for about 3 years now. So a lot of the results are coming out as to, and of course the challenges that they have faced, as well as the successes that they have had. And they have had a couple of conferences that I have attended, and the students really praise their mentors for the work that they have been able to do in the classroom. So doing research as part of coursework, which helps me also address a question that I saw in the chat about examples of ways to include undergraduate research into the curriculum. And that's something that the way, at least at UTEP, the way we approached it was asking faculty, showing faculty the results of the impact of having students do undergraduate research in other institutions, and telling them, if you have an idea, instead of having 1 or 2 students in your lab or in your research team do this, you can have a whole classroom helping you generate data for your research, come up with some ideas and so on. And then they came with proposals. And, in our case, sorry to say, we had a ton of funding, so we could give the faculty members some funding to develop these, and it's been extremely successful. Sustaining it for a long period of time is hard because of the funding, but it's been successful along those lines. And federal agencies are recognizing the value of it, so they're funding a lot more. So I encourage you guys to just write proposals along those lines, because federal agencies are interested in this. But the idea is the faculty member comes up with an idea that students can generate work inside the classroom, while fulfilling the learning objectives of that particular course. That's the key.
I'll dovetail off of that as well, Lourdes. I'll say, in addition to public funds, there are also private funding agencies that are interested in that work as well, particularly as it relates to undergraduate research in the curriculum, because of the access, equity, and opportunity that it creates, across the board. And we have some funding, not a large pot of money, but we have gotten some funding from a private agency to infuse undergraduate research into the curriculum. We have a student research mentor attached to those classes. We have our funding is for faculty professional development on how to create a COEUR, right? So some faculty are building new classes, some faculty are updating current classes. We also have funding that does some of those mentoring pieces that we heard Winny and Buffie talk about from the faculty member. We also have someone that works on peer mentoring for the student that's attached to the class. And we thread through all of that, the NACE career readiness skills, right, for both the COEUR and for the student mentor. And what we've been able to do, and we're still building, we're working on our capacity building grant now, is for faculty, they get funding for the training, they get funding for their first implementation. But then after that, we can provide a student. So we are funding the students beyond that. We don't have the funds to continue to fund the faculty to continue that COEUR class. But there have been many faculty who, now that they've kind of gotten their feet wet, you know how it is, 2 or 3 times until you get that course down pat, right? And figuring out how really to leverage and uplift and value that student that's attached to it, that the funding just for the students alone has been a really nice incentive for faculty to continue that work. And it's providing all of these opportunities for these students as well, not only in the COEUR, but also for those student mentors. And we've leveraged both some grant funds and work study funds and student wage funds to support those students that are attached to the class.
I think I've seen the question come up a couple of times now about funding from funding from COEUR. Maybe Todd, you can address that. I'm not sure that there is any grant or funding from COEUR.
Yeah, Heather may be able to answer this a little bit better. There's no direct funding. There have been people from COEUR representing COEUR that have sought NSF funding or whatnot, such as the COEUR Transformation Project. They were grant funded and recently did their publication on scaffolding of UR. And so, but there's no direct funding from COEUR itself.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about what Trisha is asking in terms of offering cures and the barriers. I just want to start off by saying we're in the same boat as you, so I don't have any answers, but I could tell you how we're approaching it. Definitely we're approaching it as an access issue, right? So undergraduate research, when it's done as a extracurricular activity, only certain types of students can do that. They're not working, they're not taking care of their families, or maybe they are, but they have the time to, outside of their curriculum and all the other things that they do, to also be able to devote a significant amount of time to undergraduate research. So that's not something that's accessible to everyone. And so definitely that's how we have been pitching to our administrators why they should care about undergraduate research in the curriculum, why they should support faculty members who are doing this in their courses. In terms of the faculty members who need additional support, we don't have the kind of funding that can give each one of them extra units in terms of the classes that they teach or things like that. But what we are trying to do is make it as easy as possible to do some of these things. So we have what are called project retreats, and we fund faculty members $500 to come and work together on their COEUR, basically. And so we set aside 4 to 5 hours on Friday. We come together, we work on our COEURs together, get a little bit of money. So the money is only $500 per faculty member, not more than that. And but then they have the time to think about it, to talk to others who are implementing COEURs, and to kind of bounce ideas off each other. And then the things that they produce are then collected and put into a database on campus where other people can look at to get ideas for how they want to implement COEURs in their courses. So it's not an answer, it's just how we're approaching it. And I don't have any, any good answers.
I wanted to just jump in here because I think I think I benefited greatly, and I know not every institution can do this, but in doing undergraduate research, and this was part of the characteristics of excellence, thinking about compensation for faculty and the time and the energy that it does take. And if you are doing it well and you are becoming a mentor, that mentorship does not end when the student leaves your class or when the student graduates. It continues on. And so creative things that at least were done at Elon were things like, if you were teaching, for example, a service learning class or a course-based service course, or a COEUR, a lot of times those classes were capped at smaller numbers, so that just the number of students that you had in your class were not going to be the same, and that could free up a little bit more time in that way. There was the opportunity, if you are engaging in undergraduate research, to bank kind of hours. It could either become a payout at the end of the year, or you could continue to bank them to the point where you earn like a course release. And we're a teaching institution, so course releases are really exciting for us, because I think the teaching load is technically about like 5 or 6 classes per year, in addition trying to do all of these dynamic things. So putting that into consideration was really helpful. Being an assistant professor and having relocated when I started, taking the payout at the end of the year was really helpful, because that paid for daycare. And then the kids started to grow up and I was in a different situation. And so banking those hours was actually much more beneficial to me, because then I could use that to do research at another time. And then I just want to add in like a strand that I think runs through all of this, which is, if we're really thinking about undergraduate research and the ways in which faculty, some staff, but primarily faculty, are engaging in undergraduate research, I think these conversations also have to align with the ways in which it's set up and valued for promotion and tenure. And a lot of times when we are rolling out these new things, we're likely to look towards our assistant faculty, assistant professors. And this could be an opportunity, given the fact that we know COEURs take a little bit more time, to look towards your associate professors, or professors that have been at full for a while and are thinking about, what's my next step, something to energize, to develop further. So I just wanted to put that out there as well, that a lot of times these new initiatives tend to veer towards our more junior faculty members, who probably feel less inclined to say no because they're worried about how that might hurt them, but also are concerned about the fact that if this is taking a little bit more time, perhaps the product that develops out of a COEUR is not something that I can move on towards publication. What does that mean when I'm going up for P&T versus somebody who's is at a level of tenure and is associate or full and has a little bit more time to kind of play outside the box, and can take a few more risks in a way. And so I think that is a piece that needs to be considered. And then, because I've sitting quiet, I'm going to say one other thing, which was, you know, when we talk about the ways in which, when this came out, when we're talking specifically about recruiting, the fact that we shouldn't be thinking about undergraduate research in kind of siloed isolation, that we should be thinking about the different areas, offices on campus that are constantly engaging with students and how we can partner with them. That could be a pathway towards additional funding, because sometimes funding can come out of, say, like a living learning community that is focused on undergraduate research. But it's also an opportunity. It also sparked my thinking about the ways in which we talk about undergraduate research specifically to our students, and train them how to talk about it on their resumes and their CVs, because I think and I think that was something that we hit upon in this new characteristics of excellence in undergraduate research, that a lot of times people are not going on to pursue graduate studies, that they're going out into the job market, at least for a period of time before they come back. And are we ensuring that when students are participating in undergraduate research, that they understand that, yes, these are transferable skills, but how do they actually talk about them so that a future employer can understand exactly how they're transferable? And that goes back to those partnerships as well.
Thank you so much, Buffy. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jeanne.
100% agree with all of that. And I'm just going to add another layer too. And I see there's some in the thread about the assistant professors, right, and challenge. So maybe, hopefully, there's some department heads or department chairs on the call here as well. And this comes out of the COEUR Transformations project, you know, what that project was trying to do. And an opportunity to think about not just your individual classes, but what does the curriculum for your program look like, right? And to build in COEURs as it makes sense, hopefully in required classes so students can't escape them, you know, and that could create that balance. What I saw some in the thread too, you know, of the size of the classes, covering content, you know, some of the issues that Winny addressed around how do you argue your position to administration, that if the department is taking the approach and saying, okay, we value this, we know that this is important, it creates all of these access and opportunity, and it's important for career readiness and world of work and all of these benefits that we know undergraduate research does, and we can't do it in every single one of our classes, right? For all the reasons that we've been talking about. But here's what might make really good sense in our major, and scaffolding that through the curriculum in an intentional way so that as students are moving through, they're getting the different pieces. It also doesn't overburden the faculty in some of the ways that we've been talking about, right? As well as overburden the students. We had we have a very energetic biology department here who, prior to them going through the COEUR transformations, they were one of the teams that did that. There were students who were doing like 5 COEURs in the same semester, and it was just overwhelming to them, right? Which, could you imagine running 5 different, you know, research projects, right, for some of our junior and seniors? And they were all wonderful things, but it wasn't coordinated, right? And it was draining on the faculty and not sustainable, as well as on the students. And so if there's opportunity to think at the department level, I think that could help in some of the advocating at the next level, as well as some of these other challenges that we're identifying as pinch points.
I wanted to add one piece to all of this conversation, because we have gone full circle. Somebody asked at the beginning, how can we evaluate the success of this? It is critical to evaluate the success of these COEURs. And how do you do this? It is not just about the student learning. It is about the trajectory of the student as they go through the course and beyond other courses, and getting comparison groups. So you would need an evaluator. You will need somebody who understands how to do this and get data, either from your research office, from your department, etc., on, you know, what are the characteristics of these students that are taking the course, and have a comparison of students who took the cookbook, let's call it that, course, or that did not take the course but have the same characteristics, same major, same ages, same background, et cetera, so that you can compare whether they graduated sooner, whether they went to graduate school, whether they graduated with a better GPA. All of these things play a role. And in the end, that's the argument that you can use with your higher administrators. Look at the success of this. We are getting more students to complete the course with better grades. We are getting students better prepared for the next course. We're getting students to graduate sooner or with better GPAs. All of these things allow you to make the case with your administrators for additional funding for the courses, for the faculty member, and so on. And at the same time, rewarding the faculty members. Making the case, we need to reward these faculty members for the work that they have done, because look at what they accomplish with the students. Getting the students to talk about this, getting the students to write reflections about how participating in research, either through coursework or directly with a mentor, how impacted them, and use those as part of your conversation with the higher administrators. I know that at UTEP, they have used those reflections for their, evaluation with accreditation. It works really nicely. So
I just want to echo that as somebody who has been a part of strategic planning and then a strategic initiative while doing this. And it goes back to what we were talking about, again, the idea of assessment and what are you assessing and what are you trying to move towards. And I think there is probably, I don't know a school that is not talking about retention because it's important, but also because of the bottom line, which is the fact that we know we're going towards an enrollment cliff. We know that students are not going to college in the same amount, at the same rates as they were before, partly because population, some certain populations are smaller and other populations are kind of starting to pivot away. And there's so much research out there about how undergraduate research is really linked with retention, that students that engage in undergraduate research, certainly by their sophomore or junior year, are just more likely to complete within 4 or 5 years, are more likely to either go straight back into graduate school or come back into it. And so if you're thinking about just in general basic level data of what you need to be capturing, I mean, yes, there's what did they get out of it? Did they love it? All of those things, but it is really how can you tie that to just their overall performance in terms of did they complete? Were they more likely to stay in the major? For example, if they stayed in the major, were they likely to graduate? All of these things are just really critically important in higher education right now. And I think almost any outside funding stream is going to ask you for that information. And then the other piece that I just want to layer on this, because we haven't talked about it that much, is the importance in doing this and disaggregating that data. And so really thinking about it's not just all your students that are going through, but really being able to break down like how many students are Pell Grant recipient students that are coming through your undergraduate research program, or first generation students, are students from historically minoritized backgrounds that are coming through, students who are coming from backgrounds where historically we haven't seen the same levels of retention and success, but we can start painting a picture that by participating in this undergraduate research program, they're not only completing, but we're also seeing where they're engaging in other areas around campus as well. So being able to map that is, I think, a key strategy in the assessment. It's a key strategy in setting yourself up for that additional funding. And it's also key points that can help a faculty member or an administrator that needs to argue this case as to why they're engaging, whether it's for P&T or for receiving more institutional support.
Well, it is 3 o'clock, And I want to thank Lourdes and Jeanne and Winny and Buffy for giving up your time today, and then also the countless hours you gave up on working on the characteristics of Excellence 2.0. If you have further questions, once again, I'd point to you, we're going to hold another webinar, this one more focused on the implementation and assessment using the characteristics. That'll be in March, so be on the lookout for that. If you are a COEUR member and you still have questions, all of these questions and success stories that you've been sharing in the chat have been wonderful. That conversation could easily happen in the COEUR community as well. Feel free to post those into the member forum. Or our Spur journal is a quarterly journal. You can now go to the archive. There's now a searchable bar within the archive. So you could type in curriculum or assessment and bring up all the articles over the last decade that have kind of dealt with that topic, and you may be able to find some answers there.